Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here we go. This is a big honor, a big treat to call Rabbi Yonah Sklare into the Motivation Congregation Studios. Rabbi Sklare, you're the first person inside of the dungeon here of the Motivation Congregation. I would like to ask you what your thoughts are of what it looks like here in this room to kick things off.
Well, it's something to be in a yeshivish studio along with a golden EIB that makes for a very nice synthesis. And I guess, Rav Michal, meeting you, that's a synthesis which you're proud of.
I am proud. Rabbi Sklare, before we actually get into the nitty-gritty details of things, I would love if the audience knew a little bit about you. Maybe tell the audience a little bit about your background.
Sure. I am very much a Baltimore native. I grew up in Baltimore. I'm an alumnus of Ner Yisrael, and presently I'm Marbitz Torah in Baltimore. I'm both a Rosh Kollel in Baltimore. I'm the resident Maggid Shir of Shomrei Amuna, which is the large, diverse shul in Baltimore. And as much as now I have more of an out-of-town profile, my online shir, my scholars in residence and the like, I am based in Baltimore. So Baruch Hashem, Baltimore has been a lush environment, and I'm happy to give something back.
Wow. We called you in today because I thought the audience would also love to hear about this book that you wrote. Inside of this book, I just want to give it a quick little introduction here. Rabbi Sklare with an E, authored a book called The Breathtaking Panorama. It is a sweeping thematic approach to Yetzias Mitzrayim. I heard it was a doozy and an absolute tour de force. And it's refreshing. It really is. And I want to discuss a couple of different points that you bring up in the book. To begin, the book is really facing and discussing about Yetzias Mitzrayim, and you start to pick Judaism apart and bring the beauty out of it with an approach that all comes from the Exodus from Egypt. I'm wondering why you chose this. Maybe you didn't choose to write a book about this. Where's your passion at Yetzias Mitzrayim, and where did it all begin?
Well, what is the number one thing people are looking for today? Meaning. Baruch Hashem, all of the concrete aspects of From Life are thriving. The infrastructure of From Life is functioning. What people are looking for is meaning, to breathe life into it. There were certain answers which were appropriate answers a generation ago. And as we age, as we mature as a Klal Yisrael, and as individuals we age, there are new responses in our quest for meaning. Now, there have been certain responses to cater to an element that, as you said, wants inspiration. Now, I don't mean to say cheap inspiration, but think of the thank you Hashem element. Beautiful what it's doing for Klal Yisrael.
Yeah.
But a Ben Torah, an intellectual, someone who, to light their fire, it takes a little more substance. They need inspiration too, but their inspiration needs to be grounded. They can't just embrace Judaism is beautiful, Tefillin is beautiful, Shabbos is beautiful. Show me, don't tell me. Show me that Shabbos is beautiful, and the cute, fluffy stuff is not going to do it for me. I want to see that Shabbos is beautiful. I want to see that Tefillin is beautiful with my adult, mature intellect and my adult, mature heart. There's a thirst. The earnest Jew is thirsting for meaning, and yet I'm going to contend there is a fundamental conflict which certainly the intellectually inclined Ived Hashem finds in their quest for meaning. The inherent conflict is as follows. The intellectual, the Ben Torah, has high standards, high intellectual standards. He needs something rigorously developed before he embraces it. A fluffy vart, which is more imposing on the text than developing the text from within, is deplorable to him or her. It just doesn't develop organically from the text. It's very nice. Okay. On the other hand, if you say, let's stick to Pshat, let's stick to that which is rigid. Pshat, kishma kenu. Pshat is pasha. Pshat is simple. Pshat is not addressing our need to find deeper meaning.
That's an audacious claim.
That's an audacious claim.
I'm a Pshat Yid.
The word Pshat means pashat. Anytime we dig deeper, there is a mode of Torah study for digging deeper. And that is inherent in the very name of that mode of Torah study.
Are you getting to drush?
Drush.
You're getting to
drush or drash? Yes.
Drash.
Yes. Drash is the most adulterated, abused, and misunderstood part of Torah.
Why is that?
People think drash means a sermon, what the rabbi says on the pulpit.
A drusha.
People think it means playing with the text, adulterating the text to reach an end. When in fact, drash is actually from the most authoritative aspects of Torah Shabbal Peh. Basic meanings, not luxuries, basic meanings emerge from drash, because what does the word drash actually mean?
To expound, to dig, darash, to seek. Dirshu Hashem.
To seek. What does it mean to seek?
To look for something.
Do you need to seek pshat? Do you need to seek what's obvious? The simple meaning of the text. Do you need to seek it, or it's staring right out at you?
I would say the second one.
Drush, seeking, means anytime something is not blatantly apparent, anytime something requires some mining of the text and some mining of self, that is the realm of drush or drash. It is not fluffy stuff at all. Mm-hmm. It is the deeper dimensions of Torah, which will give mitzvahs meaning, which will give Torah meaning, which will give us meaning if we only have the courage to dig deep. Let's start in halacha. The shofar you blew on Rosh Hashanah, or heard on Rosh Hashanah.
Okay.
Does the Torah ever say on Rosh Hashanah to blow a shofar? No. What does it say regarding Rosh Hashanah?
Yom Trua.
Yom Trua and Zichron Trua. Remembering a trua sound, a crying sound, a day of crying sound. And from that develops what? The entire mitzvah of shofar, as we know, specifically a shofar, and with pshutim afanah, pshutim me'achara, the entire halachic system as we know it emerges from drash. This is true in halacha, and I believe this is no less true in machshava and hashkafa.
But I want
to is drash in halacha and in machshava, in all aspects of Yiddishkeit. If we're going to dig deep and do something meaningful, it's the realm of drash. This is a frequently misunderstood point.
So how do you come to this? Meaning, were you upset with just inspirational ideas that didn't fit in the text, and there you developed this philosophy? Where did this philosophy of that just take it back to the basics before we dig a little bit deeper? My understanding is what happened on the 6th of Sivan a couple thousand years ago, that God came and revealed himself, prophesied to Moshe. We all watched it, and it was a big public speech delivered, and that Moshe got all of the Torah, and he taught the entire public speech, all of it, Shivim Zakenim and Yehoshua, and then the cliff notes, the short text is the Torah Shebechsav, that it allows us to kind of remind ourselves, like if somebody knows the speech and he's writing notes during it, you can go back into the Torah Shebechsav, but it wasn't created by the Torah Shebechsav. I always thought that there was Torah Shabbal Peh, and that Torah Shebechsav is there as kind of the bones, which is Torah Shabbal Peh is more of the guf. And you're suggesting the stat, or are you playing into that? How would what I just said agree with your philosophy?
The term which Mekubalim use is that Torah Shebechsav is the guf, is the body, and Torah Shabbal Peh is the neshama, it's the soul, it's what's deeper, but that which needs a physical body to contain it. A neshama cannot interact with this world without a physical body to contain it. So all the pnimius of Torah, on all its levels of Rama, Sod, and Drash, need a physical body, concrete psukim to contain it. But I think what's more helpful and more germane to our discussion is to think about the following. I don't want to talk about cliff notes and a sterile book. I don't want to go back to high school here. I want to talk about a dynamic learning experience. When the Ribbono Shel Olam gave us Torah Shebechsav, as Chazal portray, he told Moshe, I am giving you, Klal Yisrael, a methodology, a mahalach, called Midos Shatorah Nidreshes Bahem. And as the Medrash gloriously portrays, he told Moshe, I am not telling you the conclusions. He showed him 49 directions in this direction and on this side of the argument, and 49 arguments on this side. And he told him, you Jewish people, using the rules of Drash, which I, the Ribbon Shalom, am giving Moshe, you learn, you develop, you internalize through Drash, and your conclusions I embrace as my word. Mm-hmm. That is true for the Drash in the Gemara and the Medrash Chazal on their level, but that is true in the Torah Chaim and the ongoing endeavor of Torah Shebaal Peh until this very day. One cannot find a deep Judaism, which is on one hand authentic within Torah itself, but on the other hand deep and beyond Pashut without Drash. And herein lies the tension. Authoritative Drash can almost seem like an oxymoron. You see, because the Pshat is so tethered, the Pshat is so concrete. I know that that's true. But once I go into the deeper dimension, it's by definition not so well defined. So how do I know it's true anymore? So take anything in Torah. Right? If I'm going to take the story about the Bnei Slavcha and somehow develop that it's speaking to issues which you and I face, issues of resentment, issues of anything, I'm going to have to dig deeper than the Pshat. But it's not going to be right there. It's going to have to be below the surface.
So what do you do? So let's say how's one go about it? So I'm using the Breathtaking Panorama, Rabbi Sklare's Mahalach in Life. And so now I open up a Chumash and I read the pasuk of last week's parasha, Eile Pekudei HaMishkan, Mishkan HaEdos. What do I do now? So it's a very straightforward pasuk. I think Pekudei, I guess Pakad is like a recalling of sorts, or I don't exactly even know off the top of my head. But how do you connect Drash? What does one do? How does it change one's learning philosophy? What does it mean to dig deeper into the text?
It begins with asking questions and seeing points that don't resonate. But I want to elaborate this a little more. I'm going to use an analogy, which I use in the book, when I describe my approach, the panoramic approach to Torah, as in a panorama, a big picture. Let me explain exactly what I mean. The tension which I am trying to portray today, that the earnest Oved Hashem, who wants meaning, on one hand, is not satisfied with simply the pshat, that which is pashut, that which is simple, needs more on one hand. But on the other hand, needs something which is authoritative, not airy-fairy musings. That's an inherent tension, because once you move beyond the pshat, it's not so well defined. Is it what they call do-it-yourself midrash, say whatever you want? So how do you have authoritative drash?
Good.
So I would like to use the following mashal. I always use this mashal. I would like to describe criminology. Solving a crime. A sleuth solving a crime. If you know that John killed Gary, are you a detective?
Probably not.
No. What are you?
You're an aide.
You're an arresting officer, and you place the handcuffs right on him. You saw it. That's pshat. You saw it. There's no mystery here. It doesn't require a detective. You saw it.
Okay.
Drash is by definition a mystery. I'm seeking to find that deeper dimension that's there, right? But it's not staring right at me. It's elusive. How do I find it? So I'm going to suggest, in response to your question, let's think back to Sherlock Holmes. Let's think back to any detective and how they solve a mystery. It might be a crime scene in my hometown in East Baltimore. I know plenty of those. Baltimore's called the murder capital of America. But I would say up here, things are not so pretty either above the Mason-Dixon line.
You gotta go down to Norfolk, Virginia, and that's where you pack heat. You keep yourself protected. No one comes near you.
No,
you got to fight for your right.
There you go. And you have with the Navy installation right there. You don't mess with you.
You could mess with me, but it's not going to end well for you. That's what we say down south.
I hear you.
Sorry.
So,
Drush, we are detectives. We're detectives.
So how does a detective solve a mystery?
Clues.
Let's examine clues. The detective looks at the crime scene. And they don't have any proof. If they would have proof who murdered, they'd be the arresting officer. what do? They note strange anomalies. Why is there a glove in the blood? Why? Why is there a blue van? And did I ever see a blue van before with this on this license plates? They notice anomalies, things which seem out of sync, and then they start to pick up connections. Oh, blue van. And they begin with clues, and then they start to amass clues. And then
a little bit of symmetry,
to trace patterns, symmetry in the clues. Now, at the onset of this process, it's not clear what they're doing. How is that glove going to help you figure out who murdered Gary? Right? And this is in the classic Sherlock Holmes scene. What happens in this conversation between Watson and Sherlock Holmes? Right? Watson's all frustrated. What's Sherlock doing?
Why does he care about something that's so random? And
patience, my dear Watson. You see, Drash requires patience. Right? Okay, I noticed there's a strange word in
good. So Eila Pekudei Mishkan, Mishkan Eidos, right? So that's what we're doing. So strange things. What's the word? Pekudei? Is that where one begins? Or ve'ele? I think it's like there's a vav. How does it differ? I'm still not there. What do? I notice clues, and then what?
So for this process to be authentic, right, we have to learn carefully with no preconceived notions. Just work it through as though it's a piece of pshat, but have open eyes when the anomalies will stare out at us, right? You want to notice an anomaly in this week's parsha? What is the final pasuk in this week's parsha? The final pasuk of Shmos.
I know it. It's my bar mitzvah parsha. I know it.
Ahead.
Let me go. It was like, I think it was maybe 10 years ago, a little bit more, 13 years ago. The cloud came and it descended upon the Mishkan, and the Shechina was there. I'm not going to know it.
Viewed by Kol
Yisrael? I don't.
Base Yisrael. Correct?
I know that you're correct, but now it's bothering me. Now I need to know the pasuk. Okay. Wait, because my mom's gonna listen to the podcast, and she paid for my bar mitzvah lessons. I gotta make sure that this works out.
We don't start up with moms.
Ki anan Hashem ala mishkan yom v'eish tia laila boilei kol beis Yisrael b'chol ma'asehem.
Now, the final four Sfarim in Chumash, Shmos, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim, all the Sfarim that deal with the Jewish nation, post-Avos. Bereshis deals with the Avos.
Okay.
All of them have the word Yisrael in the final pasuk. Look it up.
Cool.
Right? Which is significant. Right?
Very significant.
Right? Appropriately. Some of them will have the word Yisrael. Right? Chumash ends, Le'enei Kol Yisrael, right? Some of them will have B'nai Yisrael. Look in Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim. All three end with a pasuk either mentioning B'nai Yisrael or Yisrael.
Yasam is Aram b'Mitzrayim. Isn't that Yisrael?
I said not Bereshis. Bereshis is pre the nation Yisrael.
Right, exactly.
I said all the four final Svar.
Got it.
They all have Yisrael, either Yisrael or B'nai Yisrael. There's only one that has a base Yisrael.
Okay.
And that is Shmos.
Interesting.
Is that significant?
Sounds cool.
Maybe, maybe not. So let's put that on the side.
Okay.
But hold on. Let's go back now to the first pasuk in Sefer Bereshis, in Sefer Shmos. Okay, because this is the bookend. We want to take every Sefer in Chumash and compare the opening book, the opening bookend, the final bookend. We noticed the word bias glaring out in the final pasuk in Shmos. Well, I want you to go back to the first pasuk in Parashat Shmos. What is the first pasuk in Parashat Shmos? Ve'ele
Shmos b'nei Yisrael aboyim Mitzrayim ish ubesu ba'u. Man in his house.
So is that significant that the Sefer opens with bias and closes with bias? Or is it maybe just a coincidence? Answer that question honestly. Or are you unsure?
I don't believe that there are such coincidences in the Bible. But I would say that there's something cool about that.
Something cool about it, but how much we're going to make of it? You're a little.
I know the original bias is big. The whole transformation from Bereshis to Shmos, that issue Besu Bo, Rabbi Hirsch has a big piece about Judaism is only as good as their families, and issue Besu Bo, that's where all the spirituality happens at the home. I can imagine that may find its completion when it comes to the end of Shmos, maybe something having to do with homes. But yes, I would say that it is not a coincidence that bias plays a significant role here.
And I'm going to prove the point further. You see, I tell my students at this stage in the game, notice an anomaly. It's a clue. One clue, it ends with bias. One clue, it begins with bias. What do I make of that? How significant is that? I don't know. But let's notice something else. This opening pasuk of Sefer Shmos, Eila Shmos B'nai Yisrael, does it appear anywhere else? That same pasuk, almost exactly, almost cut and paste.
Eila Shmos B'nai Yisrael.
Parak Mamvav Pasuk Ches, describing the settlement in Mitzrayim. It's the same story which Parsha Shmos is describing. These are the names of those who settled in Mitzrayim. Listen to the overlooked Shmos Pasuk in Parshas Vayigash. Ve'ela Shmos B'nai Yisrael haba Mitzrayima. Do you see same words? Almost to a T? Once you realize it, it's a clear cut and paste?
Yeah.
But here it doesn't say.
The base.
Issue besa. What does it say?
Be'ela Shemos B'nai Yisrael Habayim Mitzrayim Yaakov U'Banav.
It speaks about individuals. Hold on. Here we see two symmetrical Eila Shmos psukim, both describing the same story, the settlement of Mitzrayim. These are the names of the settlers in Mitzrayim. However, Sefer Shmos, in an abrupt shift, describes them not as individuals, but as heads of homes, which I suggest indicates that from the very beginning of Sefer Shmos, it showcases its protagonist, which is not the individual, but the Jewish home, bearing in mind that it's going to end with bias. Now, this is, of course, only a beginning. In the book, and this thus far we've had more of a technical discussion. In the book, I show hundreds of references to bias throughout Shmos, and how the entire story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Matan Torah, and Mishkan contained in this Sefer HaGeula is all about couples, spouses, learning the art of intimacy with each other, the difficulties of child rearing and not seeing children as burdens, all of the very compelling issues in bias until this very day is here in Shmos, but it has to be developed compellingly. We already have a framework in place. I'm just giving you a dogma. Do you see how before we say any vart, we need the pieces in place? And but what we've mentioned thus far are just clues and patterns. Right? But like this detective who begins to amass the clues and then trace the patterns in the clues.
It's brilliant. What
happens? Let's go back to Sherlock Holmes and Watson. He immediately told impatient Watson, what did he say? Patience, my dear Watson. But at the end, once the pattern of clues develops, what does he tell him? Elementary, my dear Watson. Because once the pattern of clues becomes apparent, now everything comes together. And now it's elementary. Now, when you engage in the panoramic approach, as I call it, and it's a panorama, you need this big picture perspective. Right? You picked up on anomalies. You picked up on clues. Strange expression used here. Language which has emotional, evocative tones to it. Whatever it is. Ooh, and this echoes of another story, a sister passage, as I call it on Chumash. I love doing that. Right? Tracing sister patterns. When you do this, you never have proofs. Proofs is how you reach conclusions in the realm of Pshat. Drash is more sensitive. Drash is not concrete. But Drash is not willy-nilly at all. For Drash to operate authentically, it needs to be based on clues and patterns of clues. And that's why it takes so much patience. But when we develop Drash well, we come out with soulful, sensitive conclusions, talking to the human condition, such as the issues of family as we develop in the book, which are not willy-nilly, but command gravitas and respect because they resound and echo from the text itself.
Beautiful. So Drash, here it is, and we're definitely calling it Drash, not Drush, because Drash, we're seeking something, we're picking up on something. I'm imagining that has something to do with it. Drash, this is, and now let's get back to the question that we began with. We're looking for meaning, let's say. That's how we began. And now the simple inspirational ideas that aren't bound to the text may not bring it home for everyone. So is this is what you're proposing, though, that if somebody learns and follows more of the approach of Drash, then they will find their meaning? Is that what we're getting at?
Yes, and I'm suggesting what you invest will determine what you reap. Drash is all about investing, digging deeper. When you dig deeper, and
what svarim do I use? What svarim do I use if I want to do drash?
So, this is a very funny thing. I oftentimes get the question from my talmidim, but most often from my seminary talmidos.
Okay.
And they ask me the following question.
So you're saying I asked a seminary question. That's what
well, no insults. Some of the most heilige neshamas who I'm Marbet's Torah with are my seminary students. But based on the way we are machanach girls with good reason, they generally tell me that we were raised to believe that a Dvar Torah is a question of which meforish, which commentary did you see it in? The notion that I have tools to develop something for myself, not something for myself which departs from Chazal and the Mefarshim. Oh no, Chazal and the Mefarshim are themselves laden with clues to add to our study, right? But we become stakeholders in the ongoing Torah's Chayim when we have the courage to do this.
We can be creative and we can develop and we can play us or become really magidei shiurim, right? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, but let's not even talk about giving shiurim. This is lishma. This is my own relationship to Torah. This is my own relationship to Hashem. Even if my idea will not resonate with anyone else, it resonates with me. This is my relationship to Hashem. Now, creativity is a very scary thing. It takes a lot of courage. But when one understands that there's a methodology, there's an approach, I'm suggesting
how to systematically go about
the
it.
tracing of clues, we're not in outer space anymore. We're, if we are, we're at least tethered back to the space shuttle. I would like to express the following as well. And that is when one learns this way, with creativity and engagement, Torah is fun. Torah's enthralled. As David HaMelech says in Tehillim, Torascha shashuai. Your Torah is my plaything. Think of the way a child plays. Think of children playing in the sand. They finger the sand. They knead the sand. They turn it over this way, that way. You see, when we learn this way, we take a pasuk, we compare it to another pasuk, we float around with ideas, we question the ideas, we seek to develop the ideas. We are as though kneading dough or kneading clay. It's fun. It's engaging. It keeps us young.
So where does this all fall in? Where does this all fall into? I think the approach is inspiring. I want to start taking up drush and expounding my verses and following the structure. Where does it come back into the sweeping thematic approach to Yetzias Mitzrayim? The book is very much focused on Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Where does that come into drush?
So the truth is, this is my approach. This is my contribution to Klal Yisrael in all areas of Torah. This is what I lecture in. Beyond my kailalim, where I give shiurim and metapa with the olam in a standard havayis tabay v'rava standard yeshiva style learning, in terms of my main contribution to the broader world in Klal Yisrael, it is this approach to drash. I could have written this book on any area in Torah. And in my head, there are more to come, Be'ezus Hashem. I could have written a bitachon book, developing bitachon from a perspective of drash. I could have written a Shavuos book. I chose Yetzias Mitzrayim as my first model and print, as the specimen of this approach in life, in flesh, simply because Yetzias Mitzrayim is the beginning. It's the beginning of Klal Yisrael. It defines who we are. And I believe people have, number one, the deepest angst to find that meaning I was discussing before. I discussed before, we all want meaning. We all think we're so well informed in Yiddishkeit, right? I knew it since I was this tall, right? But as we grow older, the known becomes stale. The known always becomes stale and boring. When you hear the same idea 100 times, you imagine that the vert has whiskers on it growing on it already, as far sprouts whiskers as far as I'm concerned. Yetzias Mitzrayim, I'm supposed to sit down to a Seder and talk about this story with engagement. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean? Yeah. I've known this since I'm a little kid. The story which is most familiar runs the greatest risk of, I will coin the adage here, familiarity breeds, if not contempt, familiarity breeds dispassion. I want to take the story that everyone believes they know so well. And as I suggest in the beginning of the book, a new Yetzias Mitzrayim is going to emerge here. Everything you fought is going to fall by the wayside. Should I use one very simple example?
Yes.
What is the basis of Paro's slavery? Why did Paro enslave the Jewish people?
You want money?
Why has slavery occurred throughout human history? You mentioned you're a Southerner, right? So before the Civil War was thought, or as you Southerners say, the War of Northern Aggression, cheap labor, right? Down south, Eli Whitney's cotton gin created a whole industry, and they wanted to develop textiles, cheap labor. So we all subliminally assume, of course, Paro's slavery was the same thing. And therefore, our mind is already primed to study the story like any other slavery story. And I suggest, before you hit go, when you read the Chumash carefully and develop it according to the panoramic approach, an entirely different slave story emerges. Paro was not seeking economic benefit at all. It's in the Pshat, but even more in the Drash when we look at it carefully. What does it say? Paro saw Bnei Yisrael were what? Paru vayishritzu were growing by leaps and bounds. And hence, he says, Hava neschak malo. I need to control this population. They are so multitudinous, they might join the enemy. There'll be a fifth column, the enemy from within. And it is to solve the problem of overpopulation that he imposes slavery.
Interesting.
Explain the Rishonim, the Ritva and the Haggadah, the Baal HaTurim. Paro believed that an enslaved people would be rendered physically impotent. Somehow the slavery would wear them down, that physically they'd be less potent. I believe it was not only physically, but even deeper emotionally, struggling to survive, right? Wrung out like a sponge. You know the Yiddish expression that I love. Azayvi, a nice geklapta haishana. Right? Many Yidden, I mean, are walking around, ice geklapta haishanas, right? They're not going to have the drive, the commitment to spouse, the engagement and intimacy, anything which it will take, right? And this is why, but I'm getting ahead of myself, this is why it took the Nashim Tzidkanias, the righteous women who, as Chazal say, engage their husbands and lured them to connection and to be interested in them. They are the saviors of the story. Because you see, Paro's entire slavery is all about, it's a crude form of population control by inhibiting family life. Now, I bring hundreds of proofs to this in the book, beginning with the Pshuto Shel Mikra. But let's stop right there before I go further. Have you ever heard this? Does anyone know this? I'm suggesting it's a whole different story. It's a story about a battle for family life. The Jewish people from time immemorial were not fighting with spears and harpoons an enemy on a battlefield. You know what we were fighting with? We were fighting with the power of love, the power of the mirrors. We all know the Chazal about the mirrors that the Nashim Tzidkanias used to draw their husbands near. That was their tool. Have you ever thought of it that way? That the entire Yetzias Mitzrayim, Sheba Mitzrayim, it's all a battle for family?
No.
That sounds out of left field, no?
A lot of this is very, very new. And it's interesting to hear there's more to the story. It definitely opens up so many different windows and vistas of chachma and creativity and making Torah meaningful. I want to try to get more towards concrete areas, like to a way that people can even, they would buy this book and besides for just bringing towards a more meaningful life, will this book perhaps enable somebody? Is it something they could use at their Seder? Is it something that's that practical? Or is it more of a sefer that one would learn in the base medrash?
The answer is all the above. I recently received an email from one of the most intelligent Jews alive. His name is Rabbi Yitzchak Breidowitz. I take it you've heard of him?
I have heard of him.
Rabbi Yitzchak Breidowitz.
Brilliant. Follow the podcast.
Man,
like, subscribe.
And a very great man. I know many brilliant people who are not loving people. I know many loving people who are not brilliant. He's both loving and brilliant. But anyway, he wrote to me that the synthesis of this sefer of so much brilliance and creativity coupled in his words with so much practicality, because I'm dealing with issues like your children. Do you see your children as a burden? In the modern day, we see children as a burden. Children are imposing on me, you know? Issues like that. I am dealing with issues like in the me generation. When I don't do something from a sense of obligation, you know, it used to be Jews would go to shul and read every line in the Siddur, the Machzor, and all those piyutim from a sense of duty. That was a motivator, apparently. I cannot understand it in the 21st century. We don't think that way before. I was discussing with Regis before. Regis is British, so he looks a bit askance at us Americans, as self-centered and so on, but that's who we are. No one is being nicer nefesh for Yiddishkeit unless it's bringing them personal fulfillment. I don't believe that. Certainly not in America in the 21st century. So I discuss the very audacious claim in this book that Judaism makes me feel free. Pesach is man cherusenu. And yet religion is imposing restrictions on me. And I developed that very relevant idea, which is going to affect every aspect of my life. Am I going to see getting up in the morning for davening? Am I going to see the burden of child rearing? Am I going to see it as a burden, or somehow be able to personalize that this is bringing my vision, my personal dream of what I want in life, greatest expression? I address issues like that in the book.
Wow.
You want to hear one nugget on a piece of the Haggadah, one short nugget regarding the issue of are children seen as a burden? I believe the Haggadah is addressing that very issue of, do we see children as a burden? Or do we embrace the?
I would imagine it has to do with the 4 children, the 4 sons, and the way that one should respond to all their different questions. Is that something that you?
Well, I discuss that extensively in the book. Meaning, I develop a very. You know what? I will take your lead here. In the book, I suggest that the notion of speaking to each child on their level and really entering their mind is a very deep, resonant one when we think about freedom and Zman Cherusenu. Think about a people who until now knew cruel slave masters. What is their notion of an authority figure?
Cruel slave
Right? Someone on top of you who seeks
forcing
to impose
you.
himself. Suddenly comes Lel Pesach, and a father wants to listen to a son's question. Ki yashalcha bencha, ma nashtana. Would a slave master ever listen to his subject's question? Do what I say, he barks. The notion of listening to a question is anathema to a slave master. Why, as parents, do we listen to our children's questions? Shut your mouth and do what I say. Why do we listen to our children's questions? The answer is because as a parent, I'm really not here to impose myself upon my child. It's really not about me. It's about them and nurturing their growth. I'm an authority figure. They're not yet, because they need me to forge, to nurture in them good decision-making and a neshama. So I am that authority figure, but I am that authority figure who's here for them. So the notion of asking questions at the Seder, and moreover, hearing each child's different type of question and entering their world, is a recasting of the entire notion of authority figures. And that's what freedom, that's what Charis is all about.
So I wanted, there's so much that is addressed in the book, and I kind of want to summarize what we've discussed here and get a sort of conclusion here. I read the book and I was blown away by how refreshed it was refreshing. That was the first thing it was different. It was new. And really, I love when a Rav, someone who's well educated and has fear of heaven, and then they're passionate about a topic. When it comes through in your work, that's the first thing. It's refreshing. It's new. It's, wait a second, a new door opened. I'm a Pshat Yid. What does Rashi say? And that's what we go. The most Pshat I have is if the Ramban differs a little bit. That's the extent of my Pshatness. But this is beautiful, and you really address in the book. Just so the listeners should know, you go into the topic like you already discussed about building happy family life, connecting with your spouse. Parenting, mindfulness is mentioned, and mental health, and you have a real nice piece on knowledge of self, which is beyond important. You put it in a serious place in climbing the ladder towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's F and F, family, faith, and freedom. In conclusion, I really like to ask. It's your chiddush. This is you're championing the idea that people should of course they should read the book, they'll get a feeling for it, that they should take on a deeper level of Torah and it'll bring more meaning, or that they should add it to their regular studies. Is it for men? Is it for women? Just so we can conclude with this, so we have something that's a real practical takeaway.
Well, in terms of this mode of learning, I believe it's open to every Jew on their level. There is a price of admission, however.
Price of the book.
No, the price of admission is amelus. You need to give it your all.
Mm-hmm.
Deeper meanings do not come without wrestling with the text, without humbling ourselves to Chazal and the Mefarshim and developing things in the framework that they have laid out for us, as I discussed in the book, rather than the cute vertlach or going out in my own direction as opposed to developing it so organically. The price of admission is serious ameos. It's open to everyone, each of us on our level, each of us personalizing it our way to make it a Torah's Chaim that we could own for ourselves. There's a famous line from a great German poet. I believe it was Schiller. He said something to the effect, you have a heritage from your father, own it. Well, I say, if Schiller, a German Protestant, said that, in a Yiddishkeit, which is Masorah-based, I need to say with all the more fervor, we have a glorious Masorah from our parents, but own it. You need to personalize the Torah. You know, when I put on tefillin each morning, would not be able to put it on passionately if I never worked on and reached a deeper appreciation of how tefillin is talking to me and my personal struggles. I would not be able to go through a Shabbos, go through another Chal and another Shalosh Shuddas if I did not develop how Oneg Shabbos is talking to me and my needs. So we have the most glorious
This makes meaning.
heritage.
It means
own it.
Own it. It's
own
beautiful.
It, and the answers are different. Adar, a generation ago, they had other mahalchim in Torah. This is Torah's Chaya.
It's new. It's refreshing. It can become addicting. It's fun. It's creative. I think that the takeaway, just to summarize, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but first of all, the book is well worth the price. You get eternity. You start to learn not only about different things, but you learn a little bit how to learn Drash. Rabbi Sklare, I would like to thank you for taking the time and coming up here to visit us in Lakewood and to come and do this interview. I reckon I'm going to keep this next to me during the Seder because it's engaging and it opens up a deeper level. It makes it meaningful. And I'm sure the children, like you just spoke about, will also really enjoy it. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. The pleasure was mine. May you welcome many other chashuva guests behind your golden EIB mic. It's not golden,
no,
but
it's black.
But the content is golden. Here in a yeshiva office, may we all be zeicha to grow together in this journey.
Amen.